I've met a lot of people over the years who have, well, rather grandiose ideas about how important they are. Back in college, I discovered this guy who really took the cake. I mean, talk about being full of yourself. He actually wrote an autobiography with chapter titles like Why I Am So Wise and Why I Am So Clever. And then if you can imagine this, he had the audacity to say that after he died, the world would probably start counting time from his birth in life instead of the birth of Christ. Now here's the funny thing about it. He wasn't entirely wrong. It turns out he really did have a pretty big impact on the way the whole world thinks today. He was kind of a tender-hearted guy who never really figured out where he belonged in this world. He did have the privilege of going to this elite school, and everybody there knew that somehow he wasn't supposed to be there. It's not that he wasn't smart enough. In fact, this guy was so smart that he became the chair of a university department before he even graduated from the undergraduate program. But socially speaking, this guy was a misfit. He was determined to prove how manly, masculine he was, but as I look at him, I suspect that he kind of feared it wasn't really true. Women, generally speaking, didn't like this guy, and the one girl he really wanted to marry rejected him outright, which naturally led him to take a cynical view of love and marriage. After that rejection, though, he isolated himself on a mountaintop, and he stayed there for a long time until he suddenly produced this masterpiece, a book about the nature of human existence that has sold untold millions of copies in dozens of languages. Now, truth be told, most of those copies were sold after he died. That's how it often goes with brilliant people. In the beginning, he had to self-publish this, if I'm remembering right, and he struggled to push even a handful of copies. Today, though, he's a household name. Now, that doesn't mean that people suddenly like him, because I think more people actually reject him, and with good reason. After all, this is the guy who essentially told the whole world that God is dead. So if you haven't figured it out yet, or it's been a little while since you sat in a freshman philosophy class, I'm actually talking about Friedrich Nietzsche, the notorious German philosopher. And the masterpiece? Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Now, if you've never read this book, I've got to tell you, there are lots of very cringy moments, especially when you read this from our side of World War II. For example, the star of this book is someone Nietzsche calls the Übermensch, or overman. Some people translate it Superman. And of course, that kind of makes us cringe because it was only a few decades after he wrote this book in German that the Nazis were talking about something that sounds just a little similar, the master race. Now, to be really honest, there is a chain of thought that links Nietzsche to Adolf Hitler, but not quite as direct as some people think. What happened is that after he died, his sister took over his intellectual property, and she was a little chummy with the Nazis. And unfortunately, what happened is that Nietzsche has come to be identified now as the philosopher of the Third Reich. Now, he's certainly not blameless, not by a long shot. It's just that the link isn't as direct as some people think it is. So today, let's talk about this Superman, the Übermensch that Nietzsche writes about. The Übermensch is somebody who rises above the mediocrity of the crowd. He's driven by something Nietzsche calls the will to power. Now, he's not just talking about raw political power, the kind that Hitler obviously craved. This is more a matter of a deep, almost unspoken will to grab hold of the planet's resources to enhance your own existence. It's more than just fighting to survive. It's more than just wanting to be happy. What this Übermensch boils down to is somebody who is willing to reject all the assumptions, the rules and regulations of society so that he can just live for himself. In this world, Nietzsche's world, the universe doesn't actually have any meaning, except whatever meaning you give it. So from that perspective, the universe is here to serve you. And if you're enlightened, it'll serve you however you want. Now, every so often, Nietzsche taught, history just spits out one of these Übermenschen, a larger-than-life, powerful person. And he claimed that all of us benefit when this happens. His favorite example, Napoleon Bonaparte. You see, in his day, that was pretty recent history. And the way that Nietzsche saw it, the French Revolution was actually a really good thing. I mean, never mind the mob violence and the guillotines and the anarchy and the senseless destruction. What mattered most was the fact that the revolution gave rise to Napoleon, one of the greatest generals in the history of the world. The pain we all went through was just a necessary step to propel the whole human race forward. So to Nietzsche, pain and suffering are actually a really good thing because they help you push toward something better. Now, part of me thinks, and this is just my own opinion, part of me thinks that Nietzsche was trying to find a reason for the suffering and disappointment in his own life. And believe me, there was a lot of it. He struggled with sickness. He lived in fear that he would lose his mind the way that his father did. He lasted just a matter of weeks as a professional soldier. He was permanently disqualified when he hurt himself mounting a horse. Nietzsche wanted to be important, one of these Übermensch, but he was kind of terrified inside, in my opinion, that he wasn't one. And eventually, after years of this tortured existence, he did actually wind up in an insane asylum, debating with imaginary people. So I think he might have been trying to convince himself that his suffering actually had a purpose. It wasn't for nothing. Now, to be sure, he really did have a spectacular mind, as repugnant as some of his ideas are. You can't read his books and not notice how brilliant he is. Now, personally, I just can't accept a lot of this because he actually dismisses the idea of God. But even then, he's blunt and honest, and he writes so well that you can't help but find it kind of compelling. And on the surface, before you stop to think about it, some of what's in this book makes scary good sense. So today I want to back up and try to do the impossible. I want to summarize the work of this brilliant philosopher and do it in just a couple of minutes. And maybe let's start with the context of his life. Nietzsche was born in 1844, the same year that Darwin published his first essay on evolution, and the same year that American Millerites were preaching the second coming of Christ. He was born right after the political collapse of the papacy and on the heels of the American and French revolutions. This is a century of wild romanticism, with Richard Wagner producing his over-the-top operas that defy all the conventions of traditional music. It's a century of budding scientism, when the writings of Charles Darwin suddenly appeared to give us a new explanation of where we supposedly came from. And what Nietzsche thinks is that Darwin didn't go far enough. He said, oh sure, they've attacked the story of creation now, and they've belittled the idea that the human race was made on purpose by somebody. But then they went and kept all the sensibilities and morals of the Christian religion. Why in the world, Nietzsche said, are we still teaching the meekness of Christ when the world is obviously a tooth and claw existence? Why pretend to be kind and self-sacrificing when it's obvious the universe doesn't work like that? That's the ugly thread that you find in his writings. This book, it's named for Zoroaster, the ancient Persian prophet who gave us the religion of Zoroastrianism, a religion that is still practiced in some places in the Middle East to this day. This religion taught a polarized universe. Everything fits into one of two columns. You've got good and evil, light and dark. Nietzsche thought that's just a little too simplistic. So he convinced himself that if Zarathustra or Zoroaster had only lived a little bit longer, he would have rejected the notion of good and evil altogether. And he would have realized that good and evil are just two sides of the same coin. So, for example, when we say greed is bad and love is good, Nietzsche said, no, they're the same thing. Love is just being greedy because you want someone else for yourself. So, sitting by himself in the Alps, he actually convinces himself that he's kind of like the second coming of Zoroaster. He's going to pick up where the ancient prophet left off and finish his work. Now, I've got to take a break because that's the way things work on this show. But when I come back, I'm going to show you where this kind of thinking actually takes you. It'll blow your mind.
Life can throw a lot at us. Sometimes we don't have all the answers. But that's where the Bible comes in. It's our guide to a more fulfilling life. Here at the Voice of Prophecy, we've created the Discover Bible Guides to be your guide to the Bible. They're designed to be simple, easy to use, and provide answers to many of life's toughest questions. And they're absolutely free. So jump online now, or give us a call and start your journey of discovery.
In this book, Nietzsche puts the ancient prophet Zarathustra on a mountaintop for 10 years, gathering wisdom. And when he becomes enlightened, he heads back down the mountain to share this wisdom with the regular folks, the rest of the human race. He visits a village he calls the Motley Cow. And he calls it motley because of a Greek word Plato used to belittle the idea of democracy. And he called it cow because Nietzsche thinks that most people are just part of a big, mindless herd. It's an insult. It's kind of like calling people sheeple. So, Zarathustra goes down into town in this story to share his incredible wisdom. And he finds the town people basically, amusing themselves to death. They're wasting their lives. Now, they don't have Hulu or Netflix, but they do have street performers who help them ignore reality. And there are street entertainers, and there's a break in the entertainment. And at that point, Zarathustra decides, now's the time to teach these simpletons what I know. To his frustration, they don't understand what he's saying, and they think he's just another amusing street act, a comedian. So, let me read to you now from chapter 3. When Zarathustra came into the next town, which lies on the edge of the forest, he found many people gathered together in the marketplace, for it had been promised that there would be a tightrope walker. And Zarathustra spoke thus to the people. I teach you the overman. Man is something that shall be overcome. What have you done to overcome him? Then a few words later, he says this. What is the ape to man? A laughingstock or a painful embarrassment. And man shall be just that for the overman, a laughingstock or a painful embarrassment. You have made your way from worm to man, and much in you is still worm. Once you were apes, and even now too, man is more ape than any ape. So I hope you notice the clear influence of Darwin here. The idea is that the human race actually descended from, or ascended I should say, from lower life forms. And Nietzsche is saying that if we just press into the future, we can ascend to something even greater. And it's that same kind of thinking that absolutely permeates our culture to this day. It's a little bit like the premise on Star Trek, where members of the Federation are bound by this rule called the Prime Directive. And the Prime Directive says that members of advanced species are not allowed to meddle in the progress of lower races of beings that they discover, because those races have to be allowed to naturally evolve all by themselves. At this point, they're backwards and simple, but one day they will look back and laugh at how backwards they used to be. Now, it's at this point that Darwin and Nietzsche actually part company. Nietzsche didn't exactly say that the whole human race was going to move upwards. No. Instead, he taught that some people, like Napoleon, become supermen. And they rise to the top of the pack because they live by their own rules. So, Nietzsche divides the human race into three kinds of people. He calls them camels, lions, and children. And he argued that we have now come to a point in history where most people are starting to realize, hey, there's no God. Right? Now that must have been something that broke his mother's heart, because Nietzsche's mother was a practicing Christian. And at one point, actually, Nietzsche was a practicing Christian too. In fact, he was a preacher's kid. But now he embraces the idea that the universe means nothing. We might want it to, but it means nothing. Most of us, he said, we're stuck in the past. We're camels. We're ignorant beasts of burden. From the moment we're born, society puts all these heavy loads on our back, and they teach us to patiently bear those loads. Don't do this. Don't do that. And we accumulate this lifetime of social restrictions that we never question. We just mindlessly carry them around like a camel carries cargo. Now, the reason we're willing to do that, Nietzsche says, is because philosophy and religion have been preaching the existence of two different worlds. We have this world, the real world, where life is hard, and then of course you have another world where things are perfect. That's what Plato taught when he said the material world is imperfect, but the spiritual world out there somewhere is perfect. It's also what Christianity teaches. We should be patient about our suffering, and we should deny ourselves pleasure because there's a better world coming. Nietzsche hated that idea. So he says most of us are camels. We're moral beasts of burden. But then, suddenly, one day, you grow up and discover none of that is real. There is no God. So he argues at that point, you've become a lion. And you go and attack all these outdated ideas. You're self-aware. You realize there is no real such thing as good and evil, just preconceived notions that have been holding you back. So the lion goes out to slay a dragon Nietzsche calls thou shalt, because the dragon tells you how to live. Thou shalt do this, thou shalt do that. And he says, now it's time to kill all your moral inhibitions. So then at that point, you become a child, where you can learn about the universe from your own perspective and build the life you want, because now the universe serves you. If you remember the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, there was this astronaut named Dave who disconnects a computer that runs his life, and the human race suddenly evolves and becomes a space child. That is nothing more than a modern retelling of Nietzsche's book. Now, unfortunately, I've got to take another break. But as soon as I come back, I'm going to pick this idea apart a little bit and ask if it really matches reality, if it really holds water. So stick around. I'm coming right back.
Here at the Voice of Prophecy, we're committed to creating top-quality programming for the whole family, like our audio adventure series, Discovery Mountain. Discovery Mountain is a Bible-based program for kids of all ages and backgrounds. Your family will enjoy the faith-building stories from this small mountain summer camp and town. With 24 seasonal episodes every year and fresh content every week, there's always a new adventure just on the horizon.
Hey, welcome back. Today I'm trying to boil down a very complicated philosophy into bite-sized pieces, and I'll admit I'm kind of making a caricature out of it. But I want us to think about this because a surprising amount of Nietzsche's thinking has shaped the world we're living in today. If the human race is going to shake off the idea of God, he said, then what we're going to have to do is find a new source for morality, a new way to live. Now, he doesn't believe the universe actually has meaning, but he said that if your human brain cobbles together just enough information to seem like there is meaning, well, that's good enough. It's an illusion, but it serves the purpose. So he said that all of us are driven by something he called the will to power, not motivated by love, not really motivated by happiness or survival like Darwin taught. We find meaning by accumulating power, by gathering experiences and resources that help us master our own destiny. Now, most people, he said, are never going to find this. Most people let religion numb them, or worse yet, they turn to alcohol, and they never wake up, so they're always part of this mindless herd. It's not that much different than Karl Marx saying, religion is the opiate of the masses. But the secret of becoming an overman, he said, is to embrace your pain, live it, overcome it, and the joy of climbing that mountain, well, it will surpass all the suffering when you finally get to the peak. So, now that I've kind of butchered Nietzsche's philosophy, let me show you one of the most interesting things he ever wrote. At one point, he realized if we declare God dead, we have this big problem because most people are not going to practice self-discipline, and the masses have no grounds for morality anymore. And to an extent, I've got to admit he's right. Right now, we're living in a generation that has thrown out most of our traditional morality, and we appear to be descending into anarchy. So, here's a story from Nietzsche, where a madman realizes what's about to happen if everybody gives up on God. Here's what he writes. Have you not heard of that madman who lit a lantern in the bright morning hours, ran into the marketplace, and cried incessantly, "I seek God! I seek God!" As many of those who did not believe in God were standing around just then, he provoked much laughter. Has he got lost? Asked one. Did he lose his way like a child? Asked another. Or is he hiding? Is he afraid of us? Has he gone on a voyage, emigrated? Thus they yelled and laughed. Now, if you read the Bible, you'll notice some similarities there with the story of Elijah on Mount Carmel. The madman jumped into their midst and pierced them with his eyes. "Whither is God?" he cried. "I will tell you. We have killed him, you and I. All of us are his murderers. But how did we do this? How could we drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What were we doing when we unchained this earth from its sun? Whither is it moving now? Whither are we moving? Away from all suns? Are we not plunging continually backward, sideward, forward, in all directions? Is there still any up or down? Are we not straying as though through an infinite nothing? Do we not feel the breath of empty space? Has it not become colder? Is it not night now, continually closing in on us? Do we not need to light lanterns in the morning? Do we hear nothing as yet of the noise of the grave diggers who are burying God? Do we smell nothing as yet of the divine decomposition? God's too decomposed. God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off of us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement? What sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? I could keep going. Maybe you want to read the whole thing for yourself sometime. But what I want you to notice is that sense of panic that Nietzsche suddenly feels. Now, some people think he's a nihilist, a man who doesn't believe in meaning, but that's not quite true. He wanted to build a brand new meaning to life without God. And he realized if we couldn't do that, it would lead to devastation. In fact, he predicted that his new way of thinking would probably lead to a terrible nightmare. Listen to this from his autobiography. I know my destiny. There will come a day when my name will recall the memory of something formidable, a crisis the like of which has never been known on earth, the memory of the most profound clash of consciences, and the passing of a sentence upon all that which theretofore had been believed, exacted and hallowed. I am not a man. I am dynamite. Let me ask you, is there a moral crisis that we attach to the name of Friedrich Nietzsche like he predicted? Yeah, there is. A madman named Adolf Hitler who took the idea of the Superman, the Übermensch, and he murdered millions of people in death camps because he believed he was the next Napoleon, a special species of human being that just stands above the rest of us and we're all here to serve him. Indirectly, Nietzsche's philosophy produced the bloodiest century in the history of the planet. More than 200 million people died at the hands of individuals who were driven by their will to power. People who thought they could force forward an evolution and build paradise. Ironically, that's actually the story we find in the Bible. In the book of Daniel, you have the rise and fall of world kingdoms predicted in advance. And you have all these Übermenschen, these supermen that Nietzsche admired, the Babylonians, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans. And eventually, before the very end, one final world power that embodies all human ambition in a final push against the Creator. And what Daniel sees is this powerful wind blowing across the sea, churning up the waters and making life miserable for all of us. It is one Übermensch after the other, treating all of us like we're members of a herd. And eventually it culminates in the final expression of human ego. The Bible says it is evil, the logical product of human beings who have untethered themselves from God. Nietzsche said there is no good and evil, but the God who wrote this book disagrees. Pain and suffering is evil. It was never supposed to happen, and God promises that He's going to get rid of it once and for all. The very moment we finally realize we can't fix our worst problems.
Are you searching for answers to life's toughest questions like, where is God when we suffer? Can I find real happiness? Or is there any hope for our chaotic world? The Discover Bible Guides will help you find the answers you're looking for. Visit us at BibleStudies.com or give us a call at 888-456-7933 for your free Discover Bible Guides. Study online on our secure website or have the free guides mailed right to your home. There is never a cost or obligation. The Discover Bible Guides are our free gift to you. Find answers in guides like, Does my life really matter to God? And A Second Chance at Life. You'll find answers to the things that matter most to you in each of the 26 Discover Bible Guides. Visit BibleStudies.com and begin your journey today to discover answers to life's deepest questions.
Let me read you one of my favorite passages from the Bible. This is in Revelation 21 and verse 4. It says, And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. Pain was a necessary part of Nietzsche's universe. He figured it would make him great if he embraced it. But at the end, his worst fears were realized. He died alone and miserable, hardly a Superman. And you can't read Nietzsche without realizing that he was tragically lonely. I believe he knew he wasn't what he claimed to be. He was no Superman. He was weak and helpless. And ironically, his Christian mother took him in and cared for him until the day she died. Nietzsche thought Darwin should have tossed aside the Creator's moral law along with the idea of a creator. And today we're still living with that. We have a society that wants to invent its own idea of right and wrong. Do what thou wilt is the code today. But more than 100 years after Nietzsche, you and I know he was teaching lies. There's no innocent child waiting on the other side of our rebellion against God, no glorious future that we can control. And the moment is coming when God will suddenly sweep all of our selfish attempts to ruin this world into the dustbin of history, and He will usher in a kingdom run by the only real Superman who ever lived, the only one who really showed us what human beings are supposed to look like. And the incarnation of God wasn't even a little bit selfish. In fact, He threw aside His own glory to save you. He endured the pain so that you don't have to. And He guarantees that He will wipe away all your tears Himself. I'm Shawn Boonstra. This has been Authentic.